Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say. And in this video, we got a couple stories from way up in Alaska. So, pull up a stump as always, and yeah, let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. Here's a story that's currently happening to me. My buddy David has 800 acres near Galena, Alaska. We're up here building onto his house and fishing the nearby rivers on our off days. We're about 15 miles back on a gravel road that goes farther onto BLM. There are a few logging trucks a day on the main road, but basically no traffic after the sun goes down. On the first day, we got there together in my Tacoma 4x4. We unscrewed the plywood off the windows, brought our bags onto the porch, and just got ready to do our stuff. We got his generator started up and unlocked his various outbuildings. The air was super stale and really rank, so we decided to open the side door to the kitchen. Along with that, I decided to open the back door of the cabin and the windows that you could open. I didn't go upstairs just to let the place air out. I sat down on the porch to rest and quench our thirst. It had only been in the low 60s, but the plywood was super heavy, and since the air was so rank, I just needed a drink. We sat there and planned our remodel, and just generally talked. We're just happy to be out here. He fiddled with his bait and tackle, and I admired the view from the front porch. Now, I'm not really a ghost or a spirit believer, but I saw something that weekend. It's really quiet, and there was a lull in our conversation. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw somebody walk out the open kitchen door. I rotated in my seat to see who was there. I barely saw the guy turn the corner towards the back of the house that was toward the forest. I think, what the? And then David yells, "Did you see that?" And I say, "I did, dude. What the hell was that?" David runs out to his truck where he has his Mossberg 590. It's buried deep in our knack boxes, and we had a bunch of stuff to unload to get to it. We just throw the stuff out of the truck until we get the box open. We decide to search the rest of the house first, scattergun in hand. We go upstairs. We look into the 2 bedrooms, under the beds, and everything. There's nothing. No sign of squatters, animals, or anything. We both affirm to each other that we saw a little man with no shirt walk out of the kitchen door to our left from the main porch. We then go towards the back forest. The house and the pad they built it on has a thick gravel base right up to the forest. The forest floor is a thick mat of leaves, needles, and duff that's hard to track it in. In fact, we looked all around and found no tracks whatsoever. With the sun going down and all of our stuff now exposed, we decide going farther into the forest is a bad idea. We go back inside and close all of the windows and unpack all of our tools. We set up our gear in the lower 2 bedrooms and regroup in the kitchen, and we start guessing as to who that was. Was it a squatter that's living elsewhere on the land and had heard us opening the plywood? A thief? Some kind of animal? Either way, we feel like we're 2 badass carpenters with guns, and we're not afraid to throw down with some little thing out in the woods, so we go to bed. The next day, we start setting up our tools and saws under tarps. We had the shotgun on a sawhorse nearby. We unloaded the table saws, miter saws, and we're just setting up our sawhorses and everything that we gotta do. We're getting all the blades adjusted and going through the lumber that he has on site. We brought cement to pour a post and pier foundation for this addition. We unloaded that and decided to go fishing in the river about 300 yards downhill from us. The guy caught 2 trout right off the bat, and I caught one about 20 minutes in. It slowed right down after that, so we hiked farther upstream. That's where we heard rustling across the stream from us. It could have been any number of animals, so we stood sharp. We fished there for about 2 more hours, and Dave started gutting the fish that we had. We both head up to the house to wash up and fry some fish. After the last few bites of fish go down, Dave stands up at the table. He says that he left his benchmade down there where he was gutting the trout. He grabs a flashlight and heads down there. He said that he looked for the rock where the fish guts were on. The knife was there, but the fish guts were gone. He half jogged back to hide being scared. Later that night, after we both go to our bedrooms and shut off the lights, in the total silence, I can hear footsteps up on the second story. I think maybe an animal or a squirrel got in somehow, so I just try to ignore it. It gets more frequent, with the steps going away from me and towards the staircase. Dave calls out loudly, "Is that you up there?" "No," I answer, now to my bedroom door. We both open our doors and step into the main room. We bump off each other in the dark and both looked at the upper staircase. I saw what looked like a small boy, but his face was featureless and his eyes seemed just pitch black in the low light. Dave just says, "Who the F are you?" The figure slowly steps over to the railing like he was about to answer us. Instead, it let out an incredibly ear-ripping screech. Like, imagine what you think a T-Rex might sound like. It was so loud I covered my ears and stumbled to the floor in the dark. It was so loud that it disoriented me. From the ground, I look up at the second floor just in time to see it run back into the bedroom. Dave ran past me with his Mossberg in hand. He ran to the top of the stairs and turned the hall light on. He then ran straight into the bedroom and out of sight. Boom, boom, boom. At this point, I am beyond scared, physically shutting down, like a heat stroke or hypothermia. I knew that those gunshots meant that Dave may have just killed somebody. Dave reappears at the top of the staircase. He jumped out the window and ran into the forest. He looked like a deformed child. His back was all screwed up and he was on his hands and knees. I say, "What? Did you hit it? If its legs are screwed up, how the hell did it run away?" He said, "I don't know, but it jumped out and ran into the fir trees." We both went out the back door and turned on the exterior lights. There was no blood on the gravel, but the smell of burnt powder was still in the wind. I say, "Was he up there all day?" Dave says he must have been. He probably snuck up there while we were working. So why would he go up there? Is there anything of value up there? There's nothing. Old blankets and pillows. I pause for a few seconds. "Dave, do you have your game cam?" And he says that it's out in the truck. He goes out to his truck while I watch him from the front door. Again, the enormous sound shatters the night. I imagine those sonic crowd control weapons that you hear about would feel like this. I instinctually covered my ears. Dave had dropped his gun and keys out of shock. He jumped into the Tacoma and locked the door, the keys and shotgun on the ground outside of his truck. I close the front door and stare at Dave through the window. He can see behind the house and I can't. His mouth is agape. I figure, screw this. I run out toward the truck and I grab the gun and keys and I beat on the window for Dave to open up. He turns to me, white as a ghost, and opens the door. Frankly, I'm too afraid to look towards the back of the house, and I just rush back to the door, carrying Dave. I slam the front door and start locking all the doors and windows. Dave is in shock. I say, "What did you see? What did you see out there?" Dave swallows deeply and says, "It was a stretched out dead guy that roared at us." Then he rolls over and pukes all over the floor. I am really starting to panic and experience tunnel vision. I didn't know what the hell was going on, and I never knew what that meant until that moment. I give Dave a rag, and I help him sit on the couch, and I sit down too. I say, "Who was it, Dave? A dead guy? What does that mean?" He said it looked dead and ashy, but it made that noise, and then it made this terrifying face when it saw me. I can't even describe it. Its face moved into an evil shape. I say, "Why don't we just leave?" He says, I can't leave all my tools here, man. I say, let's just drive into town and get a motel and then come back in the morning. He eventually says okay. We grab our phones and wallets and the gun. Dave insisted on setting up the game cam before we left. He wanted it on the front door, but I said let's put it out back on a tree to see if this thing comes back. We put up the cam on a tree directly behind his house, under full gun coverage. We then jumped into the Tacoma and peeled away from the house. We drove back into town, but everything was unfortunately booked, so we ended up sleeping in the truck. In the morning after breakfast, we drive back to this place. We pack up all of our tools as quickly as we can. We screw the plywood back up, and then with the engine already running, I go retrieve the game cam. I didn't get to download them until now when I got back home. I'm pretty sure what we saw was the little man to the center and left of the tree. Maybe it's nothing, but I know that what we saw that night was terrifying. So I live off deep in the holler, and one time I drove out to one of my backwoods spots that I like to go camping at. I'm 3 hours into a 5-hour hike before I reach the camping spot. It's a nice day, there's fresh air, clear skies, and occasional animal noises in the distance. I'm really getting that oneness feel with nature. But then I hear some rustling up a hill off the path that I'm treading. It's a dude. He's stumbling down the hill. He's walking super funny, like a puppet on strings. He's very weird looking. My memory kicks in. There were no other cars parked in the offshoot that leads to the forest trail that I'm treading. We are on the edge of nowhere. There's nothing out there for hundreds of miles from the direction that he came from. It's just forests. That's when he started to laugh and say, "Hello there." He keeps calling it out to me, and this is when I unholster my gun. The dude stumbles onto the trail. He has a real jovial demeanor about him. I rack the slide. He waves at me as he walks toward me on the trail. I take out my gun and I say, "That's close enough." The dude is completely unfazed with me pointing a gun at him and just keeps laughing and waving his arm. He's got that weird-ass gait to his walk, almost serpentine swivel to his legs, but his body doesn't move right. Again, like puppet strings were moving him. It was really uncanny. I've heard stories about things in the woods from places to know how this kind of stuff goes down. I say, "I will kill you. I'm not screwing around." And I think that if there's any semblance of sanity in this creature, then they'll leave. But he's undeterred. He keeps wiggle walking toward me. This is after I've pointed a gun at him and threatened to shoot him. I can clearly discern his facial features, and he looked kind of normal, like you'd be forgiven for mistaking him for a human if it wasn't for that extremely weird walk. He was wearing a light sweater and jeans, just a regular dude from a distance. This dude is less than 10 meters away at this point, and he continues with the laugh and disjointed conversation starters. He yells out, "It's nice to meet you." I end up firing and dumping 5 or 6 rounds into this guy. I pause for a moment because he stops walking after those shots. I think I hit him, but there was no blood. He didn't scream or wince or anything. He just stood there. Then he falls. He settles in an awkward position, like his joints and bones aren't connected right, like someone put a human together without knowing how the skeletal structure works. And then, I swear to God, he contorted into a weird mess on the trail and just kind of zipped off and disappeared into the underbrush. I hear this rapid pitter-patter of, I guess, steps that gradually fade into the woods, with twigs and branches snapping as this crinkle man gets farther away. I noped out of there hard. It was already 2:30, and by 4:30 it's going to be getting dark in the forest, or darker than I'd feel comfortable being alone with Crinkle Man out there. On the spot, I dumped my tent, my sleeping bag, and everything that I was okay with just leaving there because I needed to turn a 3 hour hike into an hour and a half hike. There was no way I was going to get caught in the forest after dark with whatever that was walking up to me in the night. With the bare essentials on my person, I double timed it back the way I came. Luckily, it was mostly downhill, so I wasn't fighting gravity like when I came up. I took care not to turn around and not to run too fast because if I twisted my ankle or fell and hurt myself, I knew that I would be well and truly screwed if this thing was creeping around. At 3:45, the sun was already starting to not show through the trees as much. A slight panic had started to get into me, but I tried my best to remain calm and just keep with my brisk pace. I got back to my car at 4:20. I looked back into the forest and apparently my eyes had adjusted to it because it was dark. 20 meters back into it and the shadows just created a cave-like darkness into the nethers of the underbrush. I got in my car and I got the hell out of there. I don't know what that thing was, but it wasn't going to be wearing my skin. I don't know if that thing is still out there, but I don't camp in that neck of the woods now. I'm not going back there for my tent or kit either. It's just not worth it for that stretch of woods. A year or two later, I ended up leaving Alaska. I still have some friends who live up there, but they're in Anchorage. If you wanted to go there, you may have to recruit a guide. And speaking of guides, a local native had told me that when I was scouting out the location some 5 years ago, to be mindful of the waterways north of the bridge. Maybe the old guy just liked telling ghost stories, but basically, he talked about forest spirits disappearing people who venture off in that location, and that for my safety, I should stay on the south side of the ridge and avoid those creeks and that waterway to the north, if at all possible. I figured he meant like bears and bull moose up there, but I never ventured on that side of the ridge, so I never peeked to find out. Maybe at some point I wandered too far north and angered the spirits, I don't know. After seeing that thing up there, it didn't really feel the same. The forest didn't feel the same, and I couldn't enjoy them like I used to. And if you ever go up to the area, if there's no other cars parked there, you're the only human in that part of the world. So, what did you think of those stories? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have any of your own stories? Do you want to support the channel? There's links in the description and all that good stuff. So, with that, I will see you in the next one, and thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching.